Good morning, everyone. Hello and welcome. My name is Emma Kiono, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the NYU Social Innovation Symposium. So as everyone's getting settled, I just have a few remarks here. I'd like to take a minute to orient everyone, since this may be a new platform. With Excel events, you can see our speakers, but our speakers can't see you. So no worries about your cameras or your microphones. But we do have a chat functionality. If at any time you need to reach out to one of us, there is the chat button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Go ahead and put your questions there, and one member of our team will be in contact with you. We are about to open our keynote address, and we will be taking live Q&A from the audience. At any point during the keynote address, we invite you to ask your questions using the Q&A function. On the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there should be a blue arrow. You can press that to open the Q&A. From there, you can add a question to be viewable by our moderator and keynote speaker. I'd like to open this conference first by thanking our dedicated team. The symposium is a joint effort between the NYU Stern School of Business, NYU Law, and the Wagner School of Public Policy, with generous support by NYU's Office of Student Engagement, as well as the Center for Sustainable Business. This is the 11th anniversary of the symposium and our first virtual event. Last year, the symposium was actually one of the last events that we were able to do in person before everything locked down. And this year's theme seeks to acknowledge the importance of centering the human connection and the human experience. This year has really opened our eyes to the importance of valuing all stakeholder groups, as well as the need to consider who is seated at the table and who has a voice, as well as the importance of the impact of our decisions on people. I'm now pleased to welcome Tensie Whelan, who will introduce our keynote speaker and moderate the Q&A with the audience. Tensie is a clinical professor of business and society at NYU Stern School of Business, as well as the director of the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business and the former president of the Rainforest Alliance. With that, thank you, Tensie.
Thank you so much, Emma, and congratulations to you and the organizers of the event. You have a terrific agenda lined up, as always. And I also want to say thank you for making it possible for the attendees to join free of charge. And I just want to underscore the request that you had made to them that potentially they can make a contribution to the New York Community Trust to support sustainability, sustainable development, low-income communities, et cetera, in New York City. So again, thanks so much for that. It gives me great pleasure to introduce John Ghingo, president of Applegate, the nation's leading natural and organic meat brand. Before I get into the rest of his impressive resume, I'd like to share that he is a Stern alum and also sits on the advisory board for NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. For those of you who don't know the Center for Sustainable Business, our mission is to help current and future business leaders embed sustainability core to business strategy, and we drive both educational opportunities for students and career development, as well as research and events and so on. So any of you interested in the topic, please reach out to us. Going back to John. Prior to Applegate, John was president of plant-based food and beverage brands for White Wave Company. And before that, John spent 17 years at Mondelez International, managing several billion-dollar brands, including Oreo, Cadbury, and Trident. John has 4 school-age children, and stimulated by that, sits on the board of After School All-Stars, a nonprofit that provides after-school academic support and enrichment opportunities for middle school children in need across the United States. And finally, one fun fact, John was on Celebrity Apprentice a few years ago. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger's first episode as host. John was representing Trident Gum. And he had a whole bunch of B-list celebrities who joined him. So I think we all want to know more about that experience, John. Anyway, without further ado, let me welcome John, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Tensie, and thank you, Emma. Thank you for the nice introduction. Yeah, the only thing I'll add on to the Celebrity Apprentice is that Arnold Schwarzenegger was gracious enough to allow me to wear his tie, which is a whole other part of the story. I want to start this morning with a simple question. And that question is, can a hot dog change the world? Can a hot dog, that simple, classic comfort food, can it change the world? This is an image of a hot dog cart vendor, New York City, steaming hot dog. It's a New York icon, one of many of these carts that you would see. And for those of you who've lived in New York for any time, you probably walked by hundreds of them. What were you thinking about when you walked by one of these carts? And more importantly, what do you think is running through the mind of the person about to grab that hot dog? Certainly, they might be thinking, I'm hungry. Maybe they're thinking, how quick can I get this, eat it, jump in a cab or on a subway and get where I need to go? It is quick, it's convenient, an easy solution. Maybe they're thinking, how much is this guy going to charge me? I don't see a price list. Do I look like a tourist? What am I going to pay for this hot dog? Or maybe they're thinking, I'm not sure I should be eating this thing. How clean is it? But it probably tastes good. But I can almost guarantee that he or she is probably not thinking about where that hot dog started, not thinking about the cattle, where they were raised, what were the cattle fed, what kind of farm were they on, who's the rancher and how did they raise those cattle, and how did it get from that ranch to this New York City street corner, and how in the world did that cattle become a hot dog? Well, I'll make the case today that if we think in a holistic way and we think more about those types of questions, we will do three things. Number one, as consumers, we'll make better, more informed choices. Number two, as business people, we'll build more resilient and stronger businesses. And number three, and importantly for today's topic, we will put human stakeholders. And there are many human stakeholders, even with something as simple as a hot dog. We will put those human stakeholders at the center of decisions. There is no way to think holistically, to think about systems, to think about the interconnected nature of things, and not think about the many stakeholders involved. In turn, if we put those stakeholders at the center of our thinking, at the center of consumer choices, at the center of our business models, I would argue that a hot dog can, in fact, change the world. So I'm going to back up for a minute. And I'd like to introduce myself a little bit more. So again, thank you, Tensie, for the introduction. My name is John Ghingo. I'm the president of Applegate. I'd also like to here up front thank the Social Innovation Symposium team and the NYU Center for Sustainable Business for inviting me and welcoming me to speak today. So thank you for that opportunity. And I'd like to thank all of you in the audience for your time and attention listening in. Applegate is the leading brand in natural and organic meat in the US. We'll talk more about Applegate in a bit. I just wanted to give a little bit more of depth on my background. Early in my career, I started working in restaurants, dabbled in that world a little bit. Then I started a more corporate chapter of my career working in advertising at one of the big agencies in New York City. It was during my time working in advertising when I really got my first glimpse of what I wanted to do. I had clients who were running businesses, who were responsible for P&Ls, working within bigger companies in consumer goods industries. And so I quickly realized that that's really what I wanted to do, is run consumer-driven businesses. But to have the impact I felt I wanted to have on those businesses and in those industries, I felt like I needed to pursue an MBA degree, and it would help me. And hence my connection and time with Stern. I received my MBA degree from NYU Stern with an emphasis in marketing and management. The Stern experience was a great one for me. Met students and professors from all over the world. It was a great, well-rounded business curriculum that ultimately, I say it didn't necessarily give me what I needed in terms of all the skills and learning, but what it gave me was the whole thought process of how to run a business and how to be a general manager. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I had at Stern. After Stern is when I really jumped into the food industry. I joined Nabisco, which later became a part of Kraft Foods, and as Tensie mentioned, ultimately spun off into Mondelez International. Mondelez is a leading global snack company. And over the years, I had the opportunity to work in marketing roles, commercial roles, innovation. I did strategic roles, and I worked in general management. And I also had the opportunity to work on global businesses where I was traveling around to almost every region of the world for a number of years. With all of that experience in bigger food companies, I learned a lot. I learned about how to build businesses, how to build brands. I learned about the global nature of supply chains. And I also learned about some of the great strengths of the food industry, as well as some of the pitfalls and flaws in the food industry. After many years of working on the conventional side of food, I made a career change, and I joined the natural and organic food industry, and that's when I moved out to Colorado and joined the company Tensie referred to, which is what was White Wave Foods at the time. At White Wave, I was responsible for the plant-based or non-dairy business, so that was everything branded Silk and So Delicious. In that natural organic experience, I learned a whole other set of lessons about a different side of the industry, one that does things differently, better in many ways, but has its own set of challenges. And I believe the natural organic industry has an opportunity to do a lot more. While I was there, I also learned a lot about plant-based food, some of the strengths of the plant-based food system. I also learned some of the pitfalls of plant-based foods as well. And, the notion of society walking away from animal-based agriculture and foods and animal-based foods is a very provocative thought. But is it the right thought? Is it the best thought? Or is there actually a better way involving both animals and plants, as has been since the beginning of time, right? A more holistic way to think about the food system. And that brings me back to Applegate, where I am today. My role is trying to help Applegate advance our long-stated mission of changing the meat we eat. I find myself fortunate to come to work every day where, I'm working with my teammates and trying to figure out how do we make choices that are going to improve the food system and figure out a better way to produce food. And I find myself fortunate to have that be my job and something that I also care deeply about. I will talk a good bit today about Applegate, partially because it's what I know, but partially because I think the Applegate story illuminates some very important principles related to capitalism and thinking holistically about human stakeholders. So I will speak proudly about Applegate today, but just know that I am only one member of a team of passionate Applegatarians, as we call them, who work at Applegate today and have worked there over the years. The credit for Applegate's legacy belongs to its founders and to all of the many Applegaters who built the business and advanced the mission over many years. We all come from different backgrounds. My work background, as you heard, is heavier on marketing than, say, supply chain specifically. I have learned a lot about the food industry and supply chains over time, but I have a great deal of experience with consumer targeting and influencing consumer choice. And you will hear that woven throughout my messages. Raising awareness and educating and inspiring consumers to make better choices, to me, philosophically, is how to create change. And that is a big part of how Applegate has created change and plans to continue to create change. We do have a very differentiated supply chain, which was very hard to build, but the connection to consumer choice is fundamental. So that all brings us back to our humble hot dog and our question of, can a hot dog change the world? And I'm going to flip that around now into a definitive answer and say that Applegate has already proven, yes, in fact, a hot dog can change the world. You might be asking how? So I am going to walk through a little bit of that story and talk about just how Applegate has been on that journey. Okay. So if you go back to Applegate's beginning, it's a story of really combining mission and business. I call it a two-step rhythm. For more than 32 years, Applegate has been in this two-step rhythm. Our stated mission of changing the meat we eat is number one. Number two, right there with it, is our business goal, which is profitable growth. And I always say, without the clarity and significance of the mission, we would never have built a differentiated brand and enduring business that's a leader in our categories. However, without a solid bottom line and P&L, the mission and change we were looking to create in the world would certainly have failed. This is why I refer to the mission and business as a two-step rhythm. You can't overweight one too much at any one time or leap too far on one without moving the other. So the line that encapsulated much of the movement and that dance over time at Applegate was progress, not perfection. Perfection is critically important for your vision, for knowing where you want to get to. But progress is the reality of forward movement, forward motion toward that vision, toward your goals, and progress is how businesses get built. Applegate started small in 1987. We were the leading brand in the United States. We weren't at that time the leading brand in the United States. Today we are. And so If I look at it, I say, okay, we're now present in more than 15 categories. We make bacon, lunch meat, breaded chicken, breakfast sausage, burgers, and even cheese. Our clean label, ethically sourced products are on millions of breakfast tables, lunch boxes, and dinner tables across the United States every day. In the early days, Applegate was available just in a handful of natural food stores. Today, we're available in just about every major retailer, from Whole Foods and Amazon to Stop and Shop and Walmart, and even available in university cafeterias and hospital cafeterias across the country. So how did Applegate capture a strong position in an industry that is filled with giant companies with superior resources? Applegate's mission to improve the system gave us the conviction and a platform to tackle flaws and gaps in the system. The meat system had become very industrialized, almost entirely economically driven and flawed in many ways. From cleaning up the mystery of processed meat to being transparent in practices, ensuring higher animal welfare, and tackling the overuse of antibiotics in animal agriculture, Applegate has been on the forefront of what we're talking about today, which is human-centered capitalism. By playing a different game and tackling issues beyond the bottom line and efficiencies, Applegate experienced rapid growth in a highly commoditized processed meat category. We became a market leader and a revered brand with our consumer base, and all of this growth and new ways of doing things led Hormel, a bigger company, to acquire us at a high multiple. The business and profit streams of Applegate were proven, they were sustainable, but at the same time, we were driving meaningful systemic and societal changes. And I would argue that the mission, the commitment to driving change, is what made us so successful. I mentioned that Applegate was acquired. We were, in fact, purchased in 2015 for $775 million. And I attribute this to the vision of the company and the ability of the company to see bigger societal needs, coupled with a passion for innovation to create solutions to those problems. Asking questions about where things come from, how are they made, how do they move, why are things done the way they're done, and can they be done differently? What are the consequences to people? And I mean to farmers, to suppliers, to consumers, to employees on each step of that journey. Both indirect consequences and direct consequences. Those are the questions Applegate was asking. And the more we asked, the more opportunities found. Opportunity to do things differently, to do things better. In the case of antibiotics in animal agriculture, which was causing a human health crisis of resistance, it required educating consumers about a problem they didn't even know they had and connecting that problem back to a kitchen table solution, which was the hot dog on their lunch plate. Applegate ended up creating a market for meat produced without antibiotics where none had existed before, and today that is a $3 billion market. The other interesting dynamic is that when you start to address some of the stakeholder issues, you find partners and access to new resources. One of the critical lessons from Applegate experience is we didn't go at it alone. We worked extensively with like-minded partners who shared some common goals. That was nonprofit organizations, advocacy groups, sometimes government agencies. When you're dealing with an issue like antibiotics in animal agriculture, again, is one example. At one point, those antibiotics used in animal agriculture accounted for 80% of all antibiotics sold in the United States. You need to work with partners. It's a big issue, and Applegate did. We worked with groups that others in the industry would have treated defensively or even with some hostility as potential adversaries, and we turned those potential adversaries into firm allies. It turns out that when you consider and value your human stakeholders and get to the root of some of these issues, there are lots of other parties who will support you. And we'll come back to the antibiotic story in a little bit because I think it's a powerful one. But to wrap this piece up, as it turns out, caring about some of the larger societal impacts of your capitalist venture is good business. Putting stakeholders, and I didn't say shareholders are important too, but putting stakeholders and the health of people, planet, animals above the P&L can make for a better bottom line. So when you think about some of the larger failures in capitalism's history, you can make a strong case that that focus on profit and efficiency over people was a root cause of many of them, whether you go all the way back almost 100 years to the Great Depression or look at the collapse of individual companies like Enron, or the 2008 housing-related financial crisis, or even what's happened recently in certain parts of the industrialized food system, when you consistently and blatantly put efficiency and profit above your human stakeholders, you can be ignoring unintended consequences. Some of them more direct, some perhaps externalized consequences, but things can eventually blow up on you. So now I'm going to bring it back to hot dogs. I'm going to try to pull up my image of what we affectionately call our hot dog. We call it the cleaner wiener. And we're going to talk about the story behind the cleaner wiener. That was a marketing handle, but there's a lot of meaning and story behind it. The time was 2006, and things were blowing up. Antibiotics were being fed to healthy animals to prevent disease. This also compensated for crowded conditions, promoted growth. The meat industry is similar to other industries. There is an economic incentive to maximize output. When you are making cars or cookies, you want to find the most efficient way to produce as many cars or cookies as you can at the lowest possible cost. In the meat industry, that starts with maximizing output from the farms. Larger farms have an incentive to maximize the number of animals being raised in the infrastructure they have. Think about large barns and doing the math on how many animals you can fit inside. Obviously, that type of thought process has implications for the humane treatment of animals, as overcrowded conditions cause numerous issues, but it also has implications for disease. When animals are confined in small spaces, disease will spread from animal to animal much faster. So, as you think about animal disease and death, and if you're a meat company, that can cause major economic loss for farmers and for meat companies. So how did the industry minimize that risk? The answer the industry came to over time was antibiotics. And I'm not talking about administering antibiotics to sick animals. I'm talking about the practice of administering antibiotics to all animals on a regular basis as a preemptive measure. This blanket use of antibiotics is overuse, and it creates big issues for people. Around that time, the World Health Organization said a public health crisis was looming, with antibiotic resistance creating superbugs. Already, thousands were dying in the United States every year from antibiotic-resistant infections. Think of MRSA as an example of one. What was happening was the antibiotics we count on for human health, like penicillin, were being overused on healthy animals. They were getting into our land, our water, our environment, and this was causing bad bacteria to grow stronger than the drugs that were meant to kill them. So you might ask, why not just keep developing new antibiotics and stay ahead of it? Unfortunately, there is not a lot of research and development going into the development of new antibiotics. It costs millions of dollars, long lead times, immense resources, and drug companies prefer to develop drugs that are a lot more profitable and used routinely, like cholesterol management or diabetes management drugs. The preferred method for scientists and doctors regarding antibiotics is to use the antibiotics we have that are proven effective and prescribe them judiciously to maintain their effectiveness. But the meat industry was not on the same page. As Applegate talked to concerned farmers, many of whom did not want to raise animals this way, but were being forced to because of the changing economics in the industry, and we talked to other concerned parties, we learned more and more about this looming issue. So as a for-profit business, what did Applegate do in the face of this pending issue? We began to shift this to make it a consumer-driven opportunity for change. And as a meat company, that meant creating an accessible product that would allow consumers to vote with their wallets, to vote with their pocketbooks, to vote with their dollars for a kitchen table solution that would work for them, for their families, but also help solve a bigger societal issue. And hence, that was the introduction of the great organic hot dog, affectionately known to us as the cleaner wiener. Applegate completely reimagined this poster child for mystery meat. For many years, hot dogs were known for long lists of unpronounceable ingredients. We went to clean and simple. In fact, the label for the great organic hot dog today is 4 simple ingredients: beef, water, salt, and spices. And of course, that beef is 100% grass-fed beef and raised with no antibiotics ever. This was both a technical challenge and a supply chain challenge for our organization. How to make a hot dog with such a clean label that would taste great and last over time for consumers. But the R&D team figured out how to do it because the challenge was clear, the problem was clear, and we knew it was the next crucial step of changing the meat we eat, which is the clarity of the mission. I'll come back to Eugene in a moment. Of course, we needed to build the supply chain. That meant working back with farmers who were willing to work with us on raising beef cattle with a clean footprint. That is, animals that had not been treated with antibiotics. Getting a differentiated product to the market was only one part of the story. We needed to do a lot more to combat the antibiotics problem. As I mentioned before, we partnered with outside groups like the Pew Center on the campaign Keep Antibiotics Working, it was called. We supported legislation in this direction, and our founder even participated in briefings on Capitol Hill. We commissioned a documentary on the topic. It was called Resistance. I believe it's still available on Netflix today if you want to watch it and you haven't seen it. We held screenings of Resistance all over the country, coupled with panel discussions with the filmmaker and scientific experts. So a lot of education and awareness building. I'll now come back to Eugene. Of course, we also had to create the market, the consumer market for the product and the consumer awareness of the issue. So that market is ultimately what gave the farmers the confidence they needed that there would be demand for this specialized cattle we were asking them to raise. So educating consumers through marketing and advertising, and we called Eugene our human cow on drugs, but it was provocative, and it was meant to be, right? This type of advertising was meant to be provocative, to grab people's attention and to alert them to a real issue. We also had to educate the trade. That's our retailers. We had to do the same awareness building and education with our retailers so they would be willing to stock this product on their shelves. And all of this was ultimately to give consumers the ability and the motivation to start voting with their dollars. This meant getting them to buy our hot dogs, but it also meant creating enough marketplace energy and competitive pressure to get other companies in industry to start working on antibiotic-free options as well. In the end, it was that hot dog, the cleaner wiener, made with no antibiotics, that probably created the most change. Because we weren't just selling a product, we weren't just selling a hot dog, we were also beginning to solve a problem for our society. It was a change agent in a bun, a tangible connection people could make between their food choice and outward change, and giving people that ability to vote with their dollars, with their barbecue grills, and with their forks. So I do want to come to an important point underneath this, which is the farms. Since 1987, we've grown from literally working with a handful of farms to close to 3,000 farms and ranches today, raising chicken, turkey, pork, and beef, all without antibiotics. This also meant finding farmers who believed animals should have more space and that animals should be in an environment in which they could exhibit more natural behaviors. We worked with farmers who were willing to invest in this type of infrastructure, this type of a better system. We worked with farmers who wanted to farm without the chemical pesticides, those who believed that that was a safer work environment. Our job was to help assure those farmers that they could earn a fair price for their animals so they could succeed and sustain in their farming business with strong economics and overall in this way of life and how they wanted to farm and live. So here we were building this antibiotic-free farm network. For comparison, conventional farm operations probably use about 35 million pounds of antibiotics yearly. We have that number from the George Washington University Antibiotic Resistance Action Center. And I do want to stress that Applegate does treat animals with antibiotics, but only when they become ill. And we've tried other holistic methods. We do not use antibiotics preventively. That is how resistance starts. You wouldn't take antibiotics every day to prevent getting an infection for yourself. Any animal that we need to treat with antibiotics because it is truly sick and in need of medicine is then segregated and sold through conventional channels. There's still a lot of work to do on the antibiotic front. Numbers in animal agriculture and antibiotic use were down over the last 10 years. I'd like to think Applegate led the way. And as I mentioned earlier, that antibiotic-free meat category has grown to over $3 billion. A lot of that really big progress was driven by the removal of antimicrobials in the poultry industry. Consumers are now on the lookout for antibiotics, and many of the poultry companies pivoted to change their system based on that consumer opportunity, the same consumer opportunity Applegate had pioneered some years ago. And that is a good thing. While at Applegate, we're a competitive for-profit company, we need to make sure we continue to stay ahead and differentiate ourselves. We also value competitors following us on these initiatives. This is a mission-driven space, and in a mission-driven space, you want that imitation. Imitation is not only expected, it is valued. It's all part of the progress of the entire system. I will caution that over the past 2 years, we have seen antibiotic usage tick back up. It's on the rise again, which is attributed to an increase in pork and beef consumption where antibiotic-free options are less prevalent. So our work in antibiotics is not done. But I do want to shift here and talk a little bit more about a whole new set of questions today. Produce good meat, and whether we should be producing meat at all. There are issues with our soil, our water, our lack of biodiversity, our air and carbon impact. We are now being told that if we continue to grow and produce food, in particular meat, in the same way we may have only 60 harvests left and climate change will continue. Once again, there's an opportunity to look at that balance of P&L and efficiency versus human stakeholders and think holistically. And once again, as a meat company, we're thinking about what can a hot dog do to change the world? If we were able to impact change with the cleaner wiener, what if we could make forgive the pun, but a greener wiener, a more environmentally sound hot dog? So, if you follow some of the criticism being hurled at meat today, some of it very legitimate and some of it somewhat flawed, but if you were to follow all of that criticism, you might think it's time to give up on meat altogether and move entirely to plant-based living. And again, while some of that criticism is valid at Applegate, we believe that meat and animals are actually a vital part of the environment and of the food system. We believe in plants and animals coexisting in harmony, and that meat can continue to be a vital part of the human experience. As the brand that champions the notion of changing the meat we eat, we also believe we are in a unique position to drive much needed improvements to the system. As we look at this moment in time, Applegate is poised to change the meat we eat again as we innovate to meet challenges and solve those issues associated with meat, like climate, soil depletion, and even social justice. We start by looking once again at our human stakeholders, our farmers, our farm workers, and our broader set of indirect stakeholders, those who are in the wake of the environmental and climate crisis, which is just about everyone. The beginning of the answer to this starts under our feet with soil. And if we want to address those issues from stakeholders, we start there. By using a holistic approach to farming and land management, we know we can support an agriculture system that is not only sustainable, but actually improves or regenerates the environment. With proper animal raising practices, including rotational grazing, we know that animals are actually a crucial part of a healthy ecosystem. Properly managed animals will have positive impact on land through fertilization and grazing habits on land to create improved soil health, improved biodiversity, improved water retention properties of land, and improving the carbon sequestration capacity of the soil. The best part of all of that is measurable outcomes where we can measure, learn, optimize, and continue. Applegate is investing in these generative practices and putting the plans in motion to produce a regeneratively sourced hot dog, as I say, a cleaner and greener wiener. And there it is. We are again working with partners, in this case the Savory Institute, who's the leading global authority on holistic land management practices, to take agriculture beyond sustainable to restorative. We are supporting the regional hub-based model to train and equip farmers all around the world on how to farm and animal holistically and regeneratively. Just as the name implies, regenerative agriculture is all about bringing health and vitality back to the soil and to the environment overall. Instead of looking at animals as a problem, emitting greenhouse gas emissions and contributing to climate change, regenerative agriculture sees them as a part of the solution. By using those holistic grazing principles, farmers and animals work together to enrich soil, improve water retention, improve that carbon sequestration, and boost biodiversity. Regenerative doesn't just mean a resilient agriculture system, but can also help build more resilient communities. Applegate has a role to play to once again help farmers who want to farm this way, this more natural way, with a regenerative and holistic approach that will not deplete their land. These are farmers who see the bigger picture. They want to sustain and actually improve their land for the long haul. But these farmers can't go it alone. They need brands and partners who can help to build a market for regeneratively sourced meat. They need confidence that there's a consumer market to farm this way, to build their communities and to be economically viable businesses. And so if you look at it side by side of soil farming, whether it's plant-based or with animals, is done to if it's done to maximize short-term profits and efficiency, will degrade and deplete land. It's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly that giving up on meat is not the answer. Poorly managed plant-based crops that are treated with pesticides and chemicals are not good for the land, for the environment, or for human health. And to go one step further, turning those plant-based crops into imitation meat products that are loaded up with long lists of unpronounceable ingredients is also not what I would call a healthy natural food system. So I come back to real natural food from a real natural system, one with animals and plants, both raised the right way. On paper, a regenerative system is one with many, many benefits. And there are farmers out there today working this way on a smaller scale, and they're doing it for good reason. Many benefits for the animals: improved health and welfare, improved quality of life, freedom to engage in natural behaviors. Many benefits for the farmers: lower feed costs as the animals are feeding off the land, improved yields from their pastures. And there's benefits to the eaters and the planet as well in terms of increased level of healthy nutrients in grass-fed meat and milk, less exposure to pesticides and chemicals, and improved environmental and ecosystem health. Just like with antibiotics, these benefits, once again, from an Applegate perspective, we know what we need to do to value the stakeholders and make the change. And so we find ourselves again with the opportunity to educate consumers and create a market, giving consumers who want to make the right choices the ability to do that. We know there are consumers and farmers who want a meat system that takes into account people, planet, and animals. They're all interconnected, but getting from here to then is going to require relentless work and partnerships. And I would like to call out, we are working with industry leaders in the space. We're also working with the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business to work on the ROSI model so we can begin to really make the business case for investing in regenerative agriculture with the help of NYU. We're also working with UC Berkeley on what we believe will be the world's first prototype or white paper of a carbon neutral hot dog. These are all exciting opportunities, and these partners will help us make it happen. So in conclusion, to bring it back home to human-centered capitalism, all of those stakeholders, the farmers, the ranchers, the retailers, the food processors, truck drivers, the employees, coming together right now to figure out how to make this greener, weener, how to take that final stakeholder, the consumer, and give them the ability to vote with their fork and change the world, as I said, one hot dog at a time. And if a hot dog can have that kind of an impact, I'll just leave you with the thought of imagine the possibilities of all of the goods, services, and business models that you all touch every day and will touch every day, and think about the impact we can all have together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for inspiring us with the story of a better hot dog, a hot dog that saves the world. And we have a lot of questions for you, so let's move directly to them. So the first one is, what are the pros and cons of working in a larger corporate structure like Hormel Foods? And how much are you influencing what Hormel does? How are they taking up any of your sustainable practices?
Great question. I'll try to answer it quickly, but get to the point. So number one, the great part about being a part of a bigger organization is they have resources and capabilities that we couldn't have imagined as a smaller entity that we're able to tap into. Hormel is an excellent parent company that gives us the freedom to operate strategically, to continue to make the changes we want to make, but offer support and help and resources and capabilities to do that. So it's been a very, very good marriage, I'd say, between the two companies. And then in terms of that bigger change, that is one of the opportunities for us, right? We like to say, how do we actually impact the bigger entity? And we are starting to do more initiatives like that, where we actually influence the bigger company, Hormel, which in turn will have a bigger influence on the industry. So that is a great opportunity and a great question.
Thank you. Another question is around COVID and the meat supply chain and how the sort of challenges for the workers in terms of their working conditions came to light. I'm wondering if you could, the question is, what have you seen companies do to tackle that, and what is Applegate doing to tackle that set of issues?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the working in the meat industry is hard work. We have a lot of great employees. We, as Applegate, we do not own manufacturing facilities. Our parent company does, and of course, there's many facilities across the country. I will say, from the very beginning, I could speak to Hormel, my parent company. Their philosophy was safety first and putting the worker safety first, and learned a lot about how to keep COVID out of our facilities and keep our workers safe, but at the same time keep product moving through the supply chain and getting to the shelves for people to eat. So that was our focus and our philosophy. I will also point out that COVID made people think for the first time about where their food comes from. A lot of people think for the first time about where their food comes from. We live in a country where we're fortunate to not have a lot of food shortages at stores and on the shelves, but for the first time, people were asking a lot more about that. And it also pointed out some of the just how specialized and industrialized the food system is. We had restaurants, hotels, cafeterias closed, so you would think a lot of extra meat and supply and food supply that would have gone to those places, and then we had store shelves empty, at regular retailers, and people are saying, why can't we get that food over here? And the answer is, we're very specialized. The supply chains are specialized, the manufacturing is specialized, and that was a big part of it. So it does speak to, we need to build a more resilient food system that can withstand those types of challenges, which may be in front of us again.
And including the workers is an important part of that. Thank you. Next question. What were some of the strategies and tactics that were successful or unsuccessful in turning people and organizations who were opponents to meat and yet some of the other issues that you tackled into your allies?
I think if you go back into the older chapter of Applegate, I do think that we stood on principle for things like animal welfare. We stood on principle for things like small farmers and what were their needs, and we stood on principle for things like environmental, cleaning up the environment. We believed in progress, and I think a lot of those organizations, let's say, are critics of the meat industry. They appreciated the fact that we were transparent and we wanted to make progress, and we would sit down at the table and talk to them transparently about where we were, what was a realistic goal, how could we move things forward. So I think that transparency and willingness to stay on principle was important, and then be realistic about what we were doing. I would say in today's world, there's a whole other level of criticism against meat, which I touched on, which comes from a place of, should we just go and move to a plant-based future? And there we're working on some very innovative solutions, like regenerative agriculture being one, but we're also working on clean label meat plant blended foods, hybrid foods, which are very clean, very sustainable, less meat, balanced with plants. So as we work on progressive solutions like that, we are attracting different conversations and different partners who want to learn more about what we're doing.
And that actually leads to a couple of questions about the plant-based meat alternatives and what kind of impact that has had on your business, how you see those new entrants and industry disruptors, and how you're tackling it moving forward.
Yeah, it's a great question, and a really interesting time to be in the, I'll call it, protein business, one way or the other. On a positive side, with the plant-based movement and those kind of imitation products have brought us a whole conversation around, what's wrong with meat. And I think that's a conversation that Applegate wants to continue to have, because the meat industry has issues that we need to continue to improve. So I think that's the positive side of it. The challenging side is, if you listen to the narrative coming out of some of the plant-based competitors, is not really distinguishing between different types of meat, best, better, conventional. And so what we have to make sure of is that we still have the runway to make progress, and that our consumers who want to buy better meat still understand that that option exists and that it's getting better every day with some of the progress we're making. So the challenge is, how do we make sure the narrative doesn't become so all meat is this, and there isn't that room for actually we're going to make progress. And the reality is meat is still a massive part of the category, will continue to be for a long time in the future. And if we can improve the meat system, we can really move the needle. So we like to say we love plants. I would love to see more clean label, organic, natural, plant-based foods. Some of us would refer to those as vegetables, and vegetables are wonderful too as a part of the diet. So, it's a balance.
Great. Thank you so much, John. And we had a couple more questions, but I know we're out of time. So I want to thank you for all the great work and leadership, as well as for taking the time to talk to the attendees of the conference. We want to thank you for joining. I know Michael Connors is going to post information for you on how you go back into the event hub and how you choose your next sessions, which will start at noon. And again, thanks so much to the organizers for all your hard work. And John, great to see you, and thank you.
Thank you all for the opportunity.